Have you ever considered that in every collapse, there's an opportunity to regenerate and reorder a new paradigm? In this mini series, Collapsing into Wholeness, we're uncovering the gems within the pattern of destruction as transformation. I'm Victoria McMahon, and when women work with me, they are held and guided, being led into life's deeper intelligence.
And I'm Danielle YS. I guide high achieving women through life and career transitions so they can befriend the unknown and step into their next chapter with clarity, courage, and curiosity. Welcome back to YSM Conversations. I'm Danielle YS, and this is Victoria McMahon. This is part 4 of the mini-series on collapsing into wholeness. We've talked about destroying, we've talked about generating, so now we're diving into ordering and what our next structures in society could look and feel like as we dive through this chapter of destroying. Last week, I was at a networking event and I was sitting next to this woman who is a priestess. We had an amazing conversation with each other, each diving really deep into our stories, our struggles, and what we are wanting to bring forth in our businesses and in our messages. At the end of our time together, we exchanged information and then went our separate ways. Over the past week, both of us have been feeling these breakthroughs. I got a voice note from her sharing these breakthroughs with me and saying, Danielle, I really believe that us just sitting next to each other was so helpful for both of our breakthroughs to happen because we were present with each other, sharing and diving deep. I've been stuck for so long on my messaging, and it sounds like you've been stuck for a long time too. And it's just amazing that both of us received these breakthroughs just by being near each other. This is something that we want to dive into today, this idea of ordering in a way that we don't actually have to do anything to make that order happen. It just wants to happen. Some of the things that we're pulling through from our previous conversation are making the choice to stay present with whatever we are deciding to do and committing wholeheartedly to what that thing is. Victoria, what's percolating up for you with all of this?
So good to be back. I'm excited for this conversation, for one. And I love how your story speaks to the ordering comes through being present. That's near and dear to my heart. How do we stay present, not only in ourselves, but also with one another and in the world in which everything does get ordered, whether we're aware of it or not? I want to bring a little event in that happened to me while I was on the road recently. It speaks to sometimes we come into presence with one another and we discover something ordering itself in us. Mine was more of listening to the greater field of intelligence that orders us. And as I've said before in other miniseries, I am notorious for being nudged by the greater consciousness. I got nudged when I was in a hotel and I saw the community of people sitting and eating, and I felt myself being moved from behind and told, go sit at this table. There's something here, a conversation with this person sitting at this table. That's that nudge. And the choice comes from the listening. And it opened a whole new conversation of sacred text. When sharing this experience in another group, someone else responded to me, oh, I agree, you should read those texts. It would open something up for you, which is what we talk about, what you were saying in the threshold and being able to receive, to open up and have your own breakthrough as a threshold moment. And I'm excited for what is the breakthrough that will come rippling through the field.
I love that you named it as a rippling through the field because the ripple came from somewhere and we feel it. We feel that breakthrough. And then our breakthrough then continues the ripple. It's not a breakthrough just for us that we get to hold dear and keep to ourselves. It's a breakthrough on behalf of everybody. And I love that that's coming through, especially in our series on collapsing into wholeness, because wholeness is not individual. Wholeness is on behalf of all living things, on behalf of all conscious stuff. Conscious stuff. It's a funny
Isn't
way to
it?
say
And yet
it.
we know what you mean.
Yeah, exactly. I love what you're saying. Can you tell us more about what's feeling like it's ordering into place with your breakthrough?
It feels like, and I say feels intentionally, I think, it feels like there's a growing relationship with how ideas come into form, how written text informs us, right? Oftentimes, I think we overlook how this notion that the universe is ordering everything in such a way that brings us from that spaciousness to concreteness back out into spaciousness, that it's in the collapse, which we talked about before, as collapse can mean coming into a new form, and then expansion into that new form. How it's so important that we understand that we're a part of that dynamic individually, and we're a part of the observing of the collectiveness of that. And it feels like your story opened up the collectiveness of it and then brought in more form of how it's happening between us, around us, within us. And I see your smile
Mm.
and I go, oh, I can't wait to hear what that brings up for you.
I don't even know if I'm going to be able to remember all the pieces. I should have written stuff down, but no, no shoulds. I was present with you and I love it. Okay, starting with in form. My mind was just blown by the way that you broke that down. Like, we are informed by being in form or by things being in form. It's like we come from the conscious stuff in form to be informed. And then there has to be still this collapsing or this dissolution of that form to then come into whatever that next iteration is. And I'm using my hands like this because it just feels exactly like this beautiful cosmic dance. I've been seeing this pattern that comes through of when in our human bodies we feel doom, deep fear, or any of those really scary emotions, when we actually feel them in our body as sensations, it feels like a dropping out. It feels like a dissolution in that root area. And I think that is the invitation into a collapse of that form. And our body's biological survival mechanism for it is to
Yeah.
clamp down on it, to contract around it and say, nope, I'm buttoning that up. And we've talked about this a couple mini series ago. We were talking about an experience that I had at another networking event where a woman said something to me and my root fell out and then the top of my body clamped on as a reaction to it. So if we just purely focus on the body, we can see, okay, when that clamping happens and when we feel even just a little dissolution or collapsing, that's an invitation into the next wholeness. So if we can let go of that clamping down and get into the dissolution of it and that physical feeling of the ground dropping off from under us, that's our pathway into whatever the next ordering is. And it's been such a funny thing to me too, because that exact sensation of the ground falling out from beneath us, of dissolution, is the sensation that all of the gurus and teachers and spiritual leaders all say this is enlightenment, when we are able to dissolve the self. And yet, it is also the thing that is the most terrifying to our nervous systems and to our physical body that just wants to survive. But it's the invitation into the next ordering.
I'd love to tag in here the notion of dissolving the self. We think that that means we have to let go of who we are, the ego. And actually, what's coming through for me in the listening is it's recognizing we have a personality that's this body form, and that the surrender is the recognition that we're more than the personality. And so collapsing into wholeness, inviting ourselves to observe the personality and be fully immersed in the greater expansiveness of who we are, even the parts that we don't think we are, but we really are part of the whole quantum field of intelligence, like we were talking about before, the consciousness stuff, that we come from that. We experience ourselves in a body with a thinking mind and emotions. And we're part of this greater field of intelligence that is always accessing us, and we always can choose and be present to the access of the greater field of intelligence. When you were using your hand movements, I'm thinking about glue or putty and how it always stretches and expands and it can change its shape and it comes back together. And I'm going to relate this to what one of my mentors says is empathy, that we're all glued to each other in the universe, whether we realize it or not. We're all in this glue of remembering who we are. And that when we can stay fully present and committed to choosing the surrender and the collapse, brings us into the wholeness of this empathic glue way of being, then everything we're doing is simply on behalf of that.
I'm moving with that glue metaphor. And it makes so much sense because have you ever been in an experience that you've been in time and time again where you have the same job, you have the same boss, you have the same relationship, even though it's not the exact same situation? And it's like, how did I get here again? The glue metaphor feels very appropriate for that because with glue, with rubber band, with anything that has that elastic property to it, further and further we try to resist it and move away from what we're actually meant to be doing over here, the harder we come back to it because there's so much more energy pulling us back. We do these patterns over and over and over again. And then at some point, the universe is like, that's as far as you're going to get. Like, let's come back to here. And then there's something that wakes us up from that experience. So I love the metaphor of the glue and us coming back together from that glue, regardless of whether we've chosen to come back or not.
Right. Sometimes we are slingshotted back. Did you not use a science geeky term for how things slingshot around? I love how we pull science and consciousness into the conversation, that one is simply another language. The glue beneath it is unity.
We're having this conversation when humans are going back to the moon and we're going further than any humans have gone before. Arguably, the most important thing that came back from the Apollo missions, the lunar landings back in the 60s and 70s, was just a picture of the Earth in its fullness, a picture of our origins and ourselves from a different vantage point, from a little bit further away in that glue so that we can see ourselves more clearly and as a whole. It's so fun that this is all weaving together at the same time.
As we're watching the world here, the structures of systems in the last week, that for me, it feels like we crossed a threshold and we are no longer the same order of a planet that we were a week ago, that we can feel a new order will rise because the old order dropped out, as you said. Then it becomes, how do we let go of the clench of the body as we felt it drop all over the world? We're not alone in this. All human beings, animals, everyone felt it in their own way, their own unique experience of it. If we're clenching, to be present, to make a commitment, to choose a new ordering, not only for ourselves, but for humanity. We're in a really distinct moment for that. And you can look to the astrology, you can look to what is being spoken in the map of consciousness of the planets about this time. And it speaks to the very same conversation we're having in its language for this moment in collapse again, wholeness, and ordering. Is there anything else that completes this weaving of this conversation, because I feel we're moving into another one in the next one.
What came to me as you were speaking of unclenching the clench or letting go of the clench is that sensation of the ground dropping out from underneath us is a sensation of free fall. That's the description of free fall. What has always resonated with me and has been so interesting from my physics days is that free fall really is no different than flying or floating. They're ultimately the same thing. If you look at astronauts on the International Space Station in orbit around the Earth, they're just in constant free fall. And that constant free fall is what allows them to float and have zero gravity. It's just a different orientation. It's just a different ordering where you get used to the sensation and you see it as floating rather than falling. So maybe that's the invitation as we move forward to be able to start to let go of that clench is to just reorder our psyches around it and say, oh, this is the sensation of flying or floating even. And maybe that helps us to move through it and invite it in as our collapsing into wholeness.
I'm feeling my body reordering with that notion. Free fall brings us into a new version of float. I've talked about going under the water and scuba diving. That same idea of how you reorder yourself and you feel the buoyancy. And so, our next conversation for wrapping this series up to talk about buoyancy and how we know we're ordering ourselves because we can register buoyancy. We can register free fall and then reorder our psyches into buoyancy and how that might happen and how that is moving us towards the next greater wholeness.
If you enjoyed this conversation, check out the other ones that we have in this mini series and beyond, and subscribe and share with anyone else who might be navigating some kind of collapse and looking for what that next ordering might be or a way into that next ordering. So good to be with you, Victoria.
Can't wait for the next one. Be well.
Thank you for diving deep into YSM conversations with us. If this stirred something in you, subscribe to keep discovering with us. And if someone came to mind while listening, share this episode with them. We are meant to move through life together.
We are Danielle YS and Victoria McMahon, sharing story with you on behalf of seeding our next collective chapter.